Welcome to Caregiver SOS On Air, presented by the WellMed Charitable Foundation, with nationally known gerontologist Carol Zernial and award-winning veteran broadcaster Ron Aaron. This program provides health, wellness, and other information for caregivers who are vital to the health and well-being of so many people across our country. And now, here are your hosts, Ron Aaron and Carol Zernial.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today on Caregiver SOS On Air. I'm Ron Aaron. Carol Zernial, our co-host, is here. Carol has a master's degree in social gerontology, 30-plus years experience in the field. She's co-chair of the Raise Family Caregiving Advisory Council and executive director of the WellMed Charitable Foundation. And Carol, before we came on, I was joking with our soon-to-be on-air guest about the topic, which is boundaries in caregiving. And I said, there aren't any.
Well, I know you said that, and you got smacked down really quickly.
I did.
You did. So it's a good thing we invited Amy to join us to talk about boundaries in caregiving. They exist.
Well, let's take a moment to introduce Amy Fuchs. Amy is a licensed clinical social worker and a certified aging life care manager. She has dedicated her life to clinical experience helping older adults and their families navigate the highs and lows of the aging process. And it is amazing when you think about it. In 2008, she created the Elder Expert, a consulting firm which provides education, care management, and coaching services that a whole lot of us clearly need. So, Amy, thanks for joining with us. Did you learn about a need for boundaries by personal experience?
Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me on. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. You can say it was personal, but it's also after 30 years of working with families. I've worked with, no two families are the same. So I've learned a lot in my years, and boundaries are the one thing that encourages others to develop self-care.
Well, there's that theory that a fence between neighbors, that little dividing line is so important for peace and harmony. And so for peace, for self-care, talk a little bit about why is it Ron thinks there's no boundaries?
I think boundaries are courageous. They're basically allowing you to love yourself while you may risk disappointing others. Ron, that might be what you're referring to. You don't want to just disappoint the person you're caring for. But in order to provide effective care, you need to be well cared for yourself. So boundaries is just one tool that I encourage people to use when they're caregiving. It's important to realize that you matter as well, not just the person you're caring for.
Well, you said 30 years in the business. How is it that you got interested in either old people or caregiving?
It's a good question. I think it found me. My kids make fun of me because wherever I am, I could be in the airport, in a restaurant, on the street, and older folks just kind of wander over and start chatting. So I think I have this uncanny ability to recognize what an older person may be feeling and going through. And I just love it. When I was in graduate school, I worked with homebound seniors. And that's essentially what I do now. I work with a lot of people who are living at home and they need help brought into their home. So I help encourage the older adult to stay in their home as long as possible. That's most people's wishes.
And one of the things you talk about is the highs and lows of the aging process. What are some of both, the highs and the lows?
Highs are patience, knowledge, wisdom, just feeling as if you've been there, done that. There's no sense of urgency. It's about looking back at your life and recognizing what you've accomplished who you've met, what you've done in your life. So the highs are what I'm truly attracted to. I think people find me when they're in the lows. It's when they've had an incident, a fall, they end up in the hospital, they had a minor surgery. I find that people, when I meet clients, they're at the end of their life, but I love hearing about when they were at the prime of their life. So usually when I'm in their homes talking with an older adult, they're talking about their past. They're talking about the highs in their life. So the lows bring me to them, but the highs are for both of us because we sit and we talk and we discuss their lives.
So, what is it that when you're coaching them, what are the most important things that they learn or they need to know and maybe it isn't obvious to them?
Let's get that answer in just a moment. I want to let folks know who may have just joined us. You're listening to the award-winning Caregiver SOS on air. Our podcast available wherever you get your podcast. Carol Zernial, our co-host, is here. We're talking with Amy Fuchs, boundaries in caregiving. And I'll let you pick it up, Amy.
Yes, thank you. I find boundaries are coached primarily for the caregivers because I find that they are burning the candle at both ends and they're drained, exhausted. They're not taking care of themselves. Their work, if they're taking care of children or grandchildren, there's a whole life that happens to a human. And when they're caregiving for, let's just say a parent, for lack of a better word, they're putting everything else at the wayside and they're not necessarily focusing on themselves. They are focusing on the person who's in crisis. It makes sense why they would focus on their loved one. But boundaries are effective in taking care of yourself so you have the energy and the reserves and the patience to care for a parent. So the boundaries, I find the education comes with the caregivers more so than with the older adult.
One of the things I heard you say when you're out with your kids, they're always amazed at how older people will come up to you, whether you're on the street or in a restaurant, whatever you're doing. Do your boundaries let you say, gee, I'd love to talk to you. Here's my card. Call me.
I politely listen and I redirect. Usually it's a short interaction because they're strangers, but my boundaries are I do a lot of self-care. I take care of myself so then I can serve the families who are caring for their loved ones. We're all caregivers in one way, shape, or form, whether we're caring for children or older adults or partners.
So, what would be some examples of ways that we might, as caregivers, take better care of ourselves?
Firstly, learn how to breathe, just effective breathing, taking care of your body, your mind, your soul, going to your own doctor's appointments, making sure your health is up to snuff, shall we say, and having a spiritual practice. It could look anything such as meditation, if you have some sort of religious affiliation, reading books about spiritual awakenings, keeping your mind, learning new things, having hobbies. So I encourage people to take care of their mind, body, and soul. And when mom or dad call, the boundary usually looks like if you're in the middle of something important for you, you don't have to pick it up. It's okay to let it go to voicemail and call them back when you're ready. Things like that. So that's how
Amy,
I sort
you
of
never
educate
answer when I call you. You never pick up the phone. You leave me hanging.
Guilt. Yes, I know it well. That's the courage to disappoint others. It's okay for them to be not okay. It's okay if they're not okay.
It's okay to
It's
not
okay to disappoint others.
Well, Amy, you just reminded me, and I hadn't thought about this in a long time. that my mother and my grandmother had a code for the phone. So if my grandmother wanted to talk to my mother, and I'm sure my mother started this, she would ring the phone twice and hang up. That meant, I want to talk to you, but it's not urgent. And so it was not unusual for our phone in the house growing up to ring twice a lot. And then my mom would say, when I'm ready, she would call her back when she was ready. So I guess that's kind of a boundary right there.
100%. I think that's a beautiful communication that they had. There's the saying, it's better to feel guilt rather than resentment. I think guilt is taking care of your own feelings about something, but resentment is when you could take it out on your loved one, and that's not fair. They're ill, they're not doing well, they don't deserve it. But it's important that when you state your boundaries, well, let's just start there. It's important to state a boundary, not just assume that they know what the boundary is. So being firm, being direct, repeat it often, say it in a calm way, and just repeat. If they forget that they weren't supposed to call before 5 p.m., just gently remind them. I think people think boundaries shouldn't be discussed, but boundaries should be discussed. They should be spoken. It's the only way.
What would be more examples?
I think one boundary for sure is the phone. I think a lot of people feel guilty not picking up the phone. So that's one boundary. The other is when you visit when it's convenient for you. So if they're like, you need to come right this very minute, but you're at work, you don't drop everything to go. You say, unless it's an emergency, obviously, if it's a 911 type situation, we're going to put those aside right now because those are emergencies. They come up. But if it's not emergent, they can wait. So I think it's a matter of knowing when to visit and when your loved one wants you to visit. That discrepancy sometimes comes up for my clients. So if the weekends are the only time you can visit, that's the only time you can visit. It's going to make them upset, but that's okay. It's okay for people to feel badly.
We're going to come right back to you in just a minute. I'm curious who your clients are. Are they the caregiver, the care recipient, or maybe both? I'm Ron Aaron. We're talking with Amy Fuchs, talking about boundaries in caregiving, an important topic. Carol Zernial, our co-host, is here. You're listening to the award-winning Caregiver SOS on air.
Well, thank you so much for listening to Caregiver SOS on air. We're delighted to have you with us. We come to you every week with a discussion of an issue, a problem, some accomplishments involved in caregiving with more than 60 million caregivers across this country, but most thinking they are the Lone Rangers. We try to bring you the latest information and help that can make that job easier and more manageable. Caregiver SOS on air takes a look at trends across this country. We provide tips on how to be a better caregiver and, most importantly, where you can go for help. On Caregiver SOS on air, we try to give you what you need to make that caregiving manageable and to provide you with the help that can make your life easier. I'm Ron Aaron. Carol Zernial and I are delighted to co-host this program, and we're thrilled you've joined us on the award-winning Caregiver SOS on Air podcasts available everywhere, brought to you by WellMed Charitable Foundation.
Hello, friend. Hello, friend. Really good to see you once again. Hello, friend. Hello, friend. Really good to see you once again.
Well, we are so pleased you're with us on the award-winning Caregiver SOS on air. Our podcast available wherever you get your podcast, and we're also on the radio in several cities in Texas and Florida as well. Amy Fuchs is our guest. Boundaries in caregiving, our topic. She is a clinical social worker licensed to help folks, especially those in aging situations. And Amy, who are your clients? Is it the caregivers or the care recipients or both?
Everyone's a client. I help everyone. The client is truly the older adult. That is the person that I'm helping. So when I coach a child, a loved one, a caregiver, it's in effect to help the older adult. So who's my client? It's essentially the whole family. Families are comprised, like I said earlier, no two families are the same. So it's important for me to get a sense as to the dynamics of each family. Not everyone was raised in a leave it to beaver kind of household. So you're not always going to have just those back and forth, positive, loving exchanges that happen on TV. Usually there's a baggage, there's childhood stuff. You have to care for someone, whether you've had a difficult childhood or if you had the best childhood ever. So either way, you become a caregiver. So how do you handle your aging loved one? And each sibling handles it a little differently. So I focus on I'll call them siblings, the siblings that need the support and the help. One is usually the doer. They're either physically close, they're always there. They're the ones who kind of are on the ground running, taking them to doctor's appointments. They're the ones who are the most stressed. They're also the ones who have a harder time setting boundaries with their loved one. Either they're living with them, they're living nearby, they feel guilt. So they're the ones who I have to coach mostly because they have to learn how to have some separation. The children that are afar, everyone has a role in the family. So from childhood. So you have the hero, you have the scapegoat, you have the black sheep, everything. So everyone handles the situation differently. What I find is just because you were that role as a child doesn't mean you have to be a caregiver in the same role. So you choose the role that feels right to you today. So someone who was the child that was the people pleaser, usually the middle child, they're the ones who want to please their parents. They're the ones who are usually the caregivers and the ones who are stepping in mostly. If that's how they feel good about caregiving, that's fine. But the other siblings don't have to do it the same way. So I think that there's this guilt that happens between siblings, like, Jane is doing so much. I feel so bad. I feel so guilty, but that's her choice. That's her choice. She can step back. She can make her own boundaries. The guilt that a sibling feels, especially if you're further away, is real. And so I try to coach them into there are things you can do from afar, paying bills, scheduling appointments, researching, looking up things online. I think there's a lot you could do when you're not physically close that are just as important.
So what do you do when families don't agree? Like, I think it's time for mother to go into memory care, and my brother thinks, she needs to stay home where she's lived her whole life.
Well, that's where someone like me does come in because I call myself like the third sibling. I'm like the sibling without the baggage from childhood. I'm completely outside objective observer. So that's when I would offer my guidance, my opinion, what I think would be best for mom. And the siblings can take my advice, not take my advice, but I'm using my experience. They only have one parent, one mother. So they're struggling with what to do, but they come with a lot of childhood stuff. So I come in with all my wealth of knowledge and I'll say to the family, well, if this was my personal situation, if this is based on all the things that I've seen, this is how I think your mom would thrive. This is where I think your mom would thrive. It could be at home. It could be in a facility. It doesn't matter. I mean, my kids, I'll be honest, I know this isn't really the topic, but communication and planning are so critical. So if you don't want your kids to start fighting when you're older, tell them what you want now.
Well, that's a good point.
That helps.
And then how do you get that home caregiver? You're out of town, you're distant, to take your advice or at least welcome it. I'll give you an example. My brother cared, after my dad passed, cared for my mom. And I remember calling him one day and said, I've been thinking it might be good for mom to go to the Jewish Community Center and participate in some of the senior programs. And my brother Jim, who like you is in his case, clinical psychologist, said, Ron, that's a great idea. In fact, she'll be on the next plane to San Antonio. Her bags will be with her, and you take care of her. I said, Jim,
I love that story.
Job. You're doing a great job. I backed off.
I was just going to say that the best thing you can do if you live further away, the best thing you can ask your sibling, how can I help? That's it.
rather
How can
than
I help?
volunteering advice.
Exactly.
I learned.
That works in every scenario. Yeah.
Well, when you're working with these caregivers, when you're working with the families, and, you've talked about self-care. What are some other key points? You also talked about communication that maybe they're not aware of that they need a little coaching to go in a certain direction.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of factors. I think communication between siblings is important. I like to tell my families or my clients it's very important for the children to be in alliance, to once they agree on the next plan for their parent, the messaging has to be the same. So they don't call John and get a different answer than when they call Jill. So when all the siblings are in alignment and the messaging is the same, the parents can't split the family because they'll say, well, John told me I didn't need to go to a facility. They'll use that as, so when the kids can get together and agree, that is like an ideal scenario because then the parents can't really manipulate. And I think I say when parents pass, the siblings have to continue having a relationship. So how you caregive when they're ill could impact their relationship afterwards. So having open, honest, effective communication throughout the entire process is so critical and it's so key. That's why when parents find themselves getting a little older, if you plan, write it down, have conversations, even if you don't write it down, just say, I do not want a feeding tube. I do not want whatever it is. As long as they verbally expressed it, the kids will then know what to do and the stress level goes way down.
Well,
That sounds like the role of a case manager.
Yep, exactly. Well, I'm a care manager. That's my role. So it's
Right.
part of what I do. Yes. Yeah.
Well, I think that you make a really good point. In caregiving, we're kind of looking down and putting one foot in front of the other. And that need to look up every once in a while and understand that as caregivers, you are going to have a life with the people around you, whether it's, the siblings, the other family members, but also to be thinking about that next step. Because a lot of times it's an evolution when you're working with older adults. Their health may get worse. There may be a hospitalization that changes all, everything, or a fall, and then all those what ifs.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's very important to plan. I say I have plan A, plan B, plan C, have all your plans in place. What I find is when mom or dad are not ready, which happens a lot, they're just not ready for any help. They're independent. They want to do it their own way. Kids feel powerless. So I say, okay, they don't want help today, but guess what? You can spend time researching. You can go to different facilities and see which one you think would be best. You could do some work on the other side of it. And then when those eventualities happen, at least you know how to enact a plan immediately because you've already done the work and that you have control over.
It's good advice. Now, for folks who are listening, we've got about a minute left and they want to get a hold of you. Do you work with folks wherever they live?
I do. I do coaching from afar. My website is www.theelderexpert.com. So you can find me through my website. I can advise from afar. If you're more local to where I am, I could do the care management piece here. There's a care manager all over the country. There's someone like me all over the country. It's Aging Life Care Association. So I don't know. I'm sure you know it. So yeah, you can find someone like me everywhere. So I always say there's a me everywhere. I mean, there's only one me, but there's someone like me.
That is a good association. If you are interested in having somebody come into your home, I did it when my mother had Alzheimer's. I invited a care manager to come in and be that neutral party and kind of help lay out the options for the whole family.
Give us that website again for folks who want to get a hold of you.
Yes, it's www.theelderexpert.com.
Thank you. I really appreciate you being with us, Amy Fuchs. And for those who are wondering about boundaries in caregiving, Carol, I think we learned a lot.
Well, I think we did. And, there's always more to know. There's always room for improvement. And we as caregivers, we want to do the best we can. And so thank you so much, Amy, for all of the suggestions you've made.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Amy Fuchs. I'm Ron Aaron. We'll talk with you again soon right here on the award-winning Caregiver SOS On Air.
The executive producer for Caregiver SOS On Air is Daniel Calderon. The producer is Sharice Pendleton. And the associate producer is Catherine Oglesby. We'll see you next week on Caregiver SOS On Air.
You've been listening to Caregiver SOS On Air, an exclusive presentation of the WellMed Charitable Foundation. We welcome emails with suggestions and comments on this program at radio@wellmed.net. Join co-hosts Carol Zernial and Ron Aaron next week for more on caregiving, improving the health and well-being of caregivers and their care recipients everywhere. For more on caregiving and podcasts of our programs, visit caregiversos.org.